Welcome to Forecast News, the place where we decrypt, enlighten, and deep dive into all things crypto and blockchain. I'm Angie Lau, and a big warm welcome to Ian Balina, self-proclaimed but emerging rock star in the blockchain world. A lot of people are starting to call you a rock star, but before we launch into that, tell everybody who you are if they don't know you already.
My name is Ian Balina. I'm a cryptocurrency investor. Left my job at IBM after 4 years to go full-time in this space. And I really bring a whole new perspective in this space by bringing data and analytics to ICO investing, initial coin offerings. And that's kind of how I built my brand very quickly. I've been in this space for about a year and a half, but really have a large following based on really adding more credibility and helping people by creating open source content around ICO investing and showing them how they can leverage data and analytics to really filter out all the spammy ICOs, for lack of a better term. Because in a space that has no credibility, where you have projects raising funds that don't really deserve to raise funds, how do you find that gem, that diamond in the rough?
Why are you a credible voice?
Because everything I've done has been very out there in the open, very transparent. When I joined this space, I was still working at IBM. And when I joined the space, most people were hiding behind avatars, not really being transparent. And I said, me as somebody who's worked in the corporate world, transparency is vital, right? To really build a brand, to build a relationship. So when I joined the space, I shared every single investment I've made.
What did you do at IBM, by the way?
I was working in sales. First 3 years I was a sales engineer at IBM Watson. Then the last year I was covering IBM open source and the IBM cloud.
And from there, you were exposed to crypto, or
yes,
were you introduced to crypto?
I was introduced to crypto. So working as a sales executive at IBM, I covered IBM cloud. IBM was very big in blockchain. One of the few companies to really put their name and brand in blockchain. So I had a buddy of mine who I knew back in college contact me and say, hey Ian, you know what? IBM is doing great things on blockchain. Put me in touch with the director of blockchain at IBM. I said, that's a very big ask. Why do you care about this? Tell me why you care about blockchain. Then he told me, oh, hey, I'm a blockchain developer. I've been investing in Bitcoin and Ethereum. I'm making 200% just by hodling Bitcoin and Ether. I said, wait a minute, you can make money on Bitcoin? So that's when I became exposed to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as a medium for investing. And somebody like me who had done investments before in the stock market, I knew those kind of returns were not normal.
Hodling, by the way, buy and hold.
Yeah, buy and hold.
Right.
So I knew those returns were not normal, so I had to look into it. And I've prided myself on being somebody who's very open to trying new things. I always tell myself, try something once before you say no. Right? So I had to try crypto once before saying no. And when I did, I said yes.
That was a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, because this world tour that you have embarked on, what day of your world tour are you on right now? Are you keeping track even?
Not really. I'd say about 9 months into the world tour.
You're 9 months in. Why the world tour? Who have you seen? Which cities have you gone to? And what has the reception been? So
one of my goals in 2016 was to quit my day job and get financial freedom. And one of the things I wanted to do after getting financial freedom was travel the world. I love world cultures, learning about different people in different places. And when I quit IBM to go full-time into crypto, I said, you know what, let's travel the world. And during the entire process, I wanted to just say thank you to my community that helped me really achieve what I've done. So every time I would travel somewhere, I'd have different meetups. Began as just small meetups at a bar for drinks, happy hours. Then as my following got bigger and bigger, we'd take over bars. Then we had to get conference rooms. And now they basically become large conferences in different places where we really bring the entire ecosystem together to coalesce around this one point of ICO investing, blockchain, and crypto. And we've done South America for a month. We've done Asia for now almost 3 months. We've done North America, obviously being based in the States, Europe for 3 months. So we've traveled around different places and just seeing the scene as it's evolving and being there face to face, meeting the people who are building the next evolution of technology is just marvelous.
For outsiders of the crypto world, and they're watching this right now, give them a temperature, a heat map of interest globally. Just basically your personal assessment of people on the ground when you land in London or Madrid,
for example,
or
we had a very
Russia.
big event in London.
Okay.
So this was an event for people to come and just see me talk. and we had over 600 people come. We had lines all the way across the theater, and that was something we hadn't really expected in crypto, right? So we also had an event in all places, Bucharest, Romania. We had over 300 people come to a club to see me talk. I had no idea I had a big audience there. I just asked people, hey, where should I go? They said Bucharest, Romania. At first I thought they were trolling me, but after checking the data, we had a very, very large following there. And reason being, there's a huge tech community there that speaks English, right? So just kind of seeing all these different places we're going to, seeing the whole reaction on blockchain, on crypto, and I think that this space is very underdeveloped, but I think it's starting to grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Tell me the demographic of your audience.
Pretty much 90% male, unfortunately.
And age?
I would say 25 to 40 is the main age.
And they're individual investors.
Yeah, so you could say that the demographic right now is pretty much people who have a job and they have disposable income and they're willing to take a risk on something that's new.
90 to 95% of the blockchain projects that exist today do not pass the sniff test.
Yes, I totally agree.
How do you elevate from the noise? How do you take a look and deep dive, as we are doing here right now? How do you deep dive into projects and say, this makes sense and this one is BS? How do you do that?
By using data and analytics. So this is what I did at IBM. I'd work with Fortune 500 companies and leverage data and analytics to find insights in the data, to filter out the noise. So I just simply applied this to ICO investing and gathered as many data points as possible, and I tried to find patterns in the data. Then after finding patterns in the data, we basically create a checklist. So for us, when it comes to investing, the first thing we look for is, let's say you have 100 projects. Nobody has time to go through 40 white papers or 100 white papers every day, every week, especially if you have a full-time job. So the first thing we check for is, do they have a product? Is there some kind of prototype? Have they shipped code? Can the team execute?
Is there an MVP?
Yeah, is there an MVP? Any project with no MVP, we pass on. Doesn't matter if it's the best team in the world, best idea in the world, because the data tells us that 90% of the best projects from an ROI perspective, from a return on investment perspective, had some kind of MVP, right? So the next thing the data tells us is 60% of the best projects from an ROI perspective had what I call all-star teams. The teams were very credible. They weren't just random people in the middle of nowhere asking for your money. They had somebody who worked at, for example, Google, Facebook, Amazon, McKinsey, Bain Capital, or Bitcoin core developer, Ethereum core developer. They had either a credible company, like a Fortune 500 expertise or experience, or a credible blockchain project they had worked on before.
So kind of like us at Forecast News, you put on your investigative journalism hat and you trust but verify.
Yeah,
so you verify the team.
Yeah, so we go through and check every single team member the company has on their sites and check their background and history and say, okay, imagine you're Google. Would you hire this person to work at Google? If it's a yes, they're an all-star. If it's a no, they're really an all-star.
Okay, so you have to have an MVP. You have to have an all-star team that you've checked out. Then, what's the third?
Then the actual token metrics, the actual data, the numbers. How many total tokens are they creating? And how greedy is the team? Are most tokens being held by the team? Are they being held by investors? So taking all these different data points, then creating a holistic grade that tells you whether it's a yes or no on the project.
So what's the ratio that you usually give a good grade to in terms of what the investment community holds and what the internal team holds?
In terms of?
Tokens.
Tokens? I mean, so I think ideally...
Is there a ratio, formula?
Yes, so it's kind of a scale, a spectrum. So we basically use the 3 sigma rule in stats, which basically says you gather as many data points as possible, and based on the best ICOs of all time, see how far new ICOs deviate from the mean. Then based on how far they deviate from the mean, basically give them a sliding scale.
Okay.
So if an ICO, for example, with total tokens deviates from the mean by a degree of 1, it gets X points. 2 deviations from the mean, Y points, whatever, right? So the farther away it deviates from the mean, the less likely it is to be a good all-star. And that's for every single data point.
You're still talking about virgin territory for most markets, most traditional structures, most financial institutions. Institutional money is interested, but it doesn't feel safe yet. This really feels like a self-originated, hyped industry. For a lot of outsiders, that's what they see.
Yes.
What do you see How would you respond to that view?
I see opportunity, right? So as somebody who's an investor, the higher the risk, the more opportunity it is to make money as an investor. And I feel like this space, actually I would say there are lots of institutions behind this space. They're just more on the low. They're very discreet about it because they aren't trying to rock the boat too much, especially publicly, right? As somebody who worked at IBM, I understand that policy.
How important is the actual project to you versus the ability to play in the token space because of the hype or the buzz or the marketing ability of that team?
I would say the team matters even more out of everything. So you kind of have two schools of thought. People who like the idea, people who invest in teams. I'm more of a team investor than an idea investor because I believe a great team can really make any idea work, or they can pivot and find a better idea. But if you could have the best idea in the world, but if your team is mediocre, they will not take that global or make that really something that the masses would like. For example, if you take Uber as an example, Uber was not the first on-demand taxi application. They were not, but they had the best execution and the best team.
Mm-hmm. How do you take a look at this space and say that you want to aggregate as many eyeballs as possible. People are interested in you. Mm-hmm. Part of your roadshow is to generate the buzz and the interest. But also, what kind of responsibility do you have for your followers?
I think it's just by being honest, transparent, and also creating free open source content, right? So as somebody who worked at open source at IBM, I believe in giving back to the community, right? So I built my entire brand by just creating really in-depth content for free. Because I believe if anybody has if anybody's willing to put in the effort to learn something, they should have content to learn that, as opposed to having to pay for it. So one of my mottos is to create free content that's better than anybody's paid content. Because I feel like if people could really have this information, then knowledge is power.
How big is your following, by the way?
Pretty big. On YouTube, I would say about 120,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Twitter, about 150,000. Email, about 130,000. Telegram, about 30,000 or so. My spreadsheet, which is kind of what I'm really known for at the peak before I kind of took it down because it was getting too viral, too big, was getting viewed over 1 million times a month by investors all over the world. It came to a point where it was too influential, and I was, for the most part, moving markets with it. So I had to take it down and kind of reconsider how to really better serve my community without changing the entire market too much.
So that's pretty good respect right there, the fact that you recognize that you were a market maker, in a sense. That got a little uncomfortable for you?
Yes, it did, because one of my goals was to really help people discover these projects and just share my process of research so that they could also go out there and create their own. But my research was pretty spot on for the most part, that people would start to blindly follow it without doing much research because they just trusted my actual research and my picks. And I didn't really like that, and it came to a point where I wasn't really serving my community, because if I said a project was a great project, it would raise too much money too quickly. The whitelist would fill up too fast, and people who were doing the actual research didn't really have a chance to participate, right? So it kind of was self-defeating. So I had to go back to the drawing board and figure out a way to really keep my content free, because I never wanted to really charge for it, right? So because you had the option, I had friends say, just put a price on it that would decrease the amount of people who are viewing the spreadsheet, and you won't make the market too much, and you also get paid for it. But I wanted to keep it open source and free. So now we've been working on turning this into an application and keeping it free, but still kind of constraining it to only people who are active in our community, and not people all over the world who are not really active and just blindly investing.
The blindly investing is scary because there is really no sheriff in town. There are some big regulators in this space that are clamping down and shutting things down before really taking a deep dive look into why they should regulate something or just shut it down entirely. How dangerous is that kind of educational vacuum that you see with the industry and traditional regulators.
Yeah, it is very dangerous. People who make content have to really tread carefully, right? Because what you're doing is not really showcasing your process of researching and investing, but that could also be deemed as financial advice to people.
Right.
Right. So I'm known in all my content for making disclaimers. Now it's kind of a meme, right? Every time I say this is not financial advice, I'm not your financial advisor, because you really have to, especially when some people are dabbling in investing for the first time and it's crypto. Maybe somebody who has prior experience in other markets could understand the nature of investing, but some people just join crypto and this is their first time investing, and they treat this kind of like gambling, right? Anything you say is financial advice.
You've lost money.
Oh yes, oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, I don't win all the time, right? So I definitely.
What's your loss record?
I would say about 80% or more of my investments are wins I make money on, right? So I'd say about 20% or so I lose money on, right? And I've kind of built a brand like that because in a space where you could say 80% of the projects lose money, to have a track record where you're making money consistently 80% of the time is pretty good.
But this is a full-time job. I mean,
yes,
if somebody,
this is my full-time job.
if somebody wanted to play in the space, make the kind of returns that you do, they'd have to really dedicate themselves educationally, time-wise, commitment-wise.
That definitely helps, but it's possible to do it while still having a full-time job. That's how I was doing it while working at IBM. And I kind of showed people how to really take that control and be more efficient with your research and investment strategy. Because the way I view it is similar to Moneyball, how the New York Yankees had all the money in the world, or other sports teams like Real Madrid, FC Barcelona. How do you compete with them if you're the Oakland A's, if you're a smaller team? If you don't have all the resources in the world, how do you compete with them? So my strategy is kind of the same process, because if you're a retail investor, how do you compete with a full-time investor? How do you compete with the funds, the hedge funds, the venture capital funds? Because they have all the resources in the world. So I've showed them a strategy to really go through and filter through so many different projects very quickly while still having a life, while still having a family.
Well, it's hard when you're traveling all the time, right, Ian?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so after Hong Kong is where?
Manila, Philippines.
Manila, you were just in India, you've been, so where else on the world tour do you still have to go?
So we still have to do Central America, so I definitely want to go to Mexico, Cuba, Puerto Rico, we have the Middle East, Dubai, Tel Aviv, Israel, then also Africa, where I'm from. So that's going to be kind of like my homecoming. So we're planning to do Cairo, Egypt, Accra, Ghana, Lagos, Nigeria, Kampala, Uganda, where I was born, Nairobi, Kenya, and Cape Town, South Africa.
What are the 3 things that you would change in the ecosystem?
I would add more transparency for everyone, from the investors to the projects as well. I feel like because this space is not really regulated, there isn't really a universal standard on how to disclose things for investors and projects, and even people making content in this space. So I think definitely regulation and some form of standard for everyone is vital.
What's the one thing that keeps you up at night right now?
Oh, wow.
Aside from keeping your hard wallet and not getting hacked, by the way.
Yeah, I was hacked. In terms of what keeps me up at night, just wanting to innovate even more, right? Because I really have this vision of trying to take cryptocurrency mainstream, right? And if I have to single-handedly do it myself, I have no issues with that.
But that's the thing, and back to the hacking issue, is that this is such wide open space that people hear stories like Ian Balina getting hacked and losing millions of dollars. Nobody wants that for themselves.
Yeah.
How does somebody who is as prolific and sophisticated as you get hacked?
I was reckless with how I was handling my security, and it also really made me open up and realize if this space is really to go more mainstream, this has to be solved, right? Because I imagine, what if this was my mom, my siblings, or just anybody who's not so tech savvy, right? If people in this space who understand crypto and are tech savvy are getting hacked, then how's this really going to go to mainstream? Because for the average person who's not really a techie, right, the person who's the latecomer in technology adoption, there has to be a way for them to really use this technology without having to use a hexadecimal address to send money. When it's just as simple as sending money via PayPal or Venmo or whatever, right? So that's really made me kind of reconsider that there has to be some other influence to get people to really make this simpler for anybody to adopt and use.
You've got some exclusive breaking news to share with us?
Yes, I do. So today, officially, I'll be joining KuCoin Cryptocurrency Exchange as their first global Titan ambassador. I'll be working with them as a brand ambassador to really help partner with them to take cryptocurrencies mainstream. I chose KuCoin specifically because they love my work. They've been following me for a long time. I was working with them during the cryptocurrency hack I had, and I really got a chance to understand the team, but more importantly, they understand that they're not at the top of the food chain in terms of exchanges, but they're hungry, right? And they see what we're building right now in terms of our media content of educating people with open source education and crypto in the crypto space. And they also want to take their cryptocurrency and blockchain global, right? So they feel like we can partner together to really take this message to the masses.
Fear, uncertainty, doubt. Those are 3 words, FUD, the acronym. But that's something KuCoin has experienced just these past 2 weeks. There has been questions about where they're based, whether or not they're legit. Did they reach out to you in response to trying to regain the credibility?
Not really. They put out a public statement showcasing the offices, right? But also prior to that, we already had plans to go visit the offices in China and Thailand, right? So to me, it's not really anything I'm concerned, because one of the issues with crypto is FUD spreads so quickly, right? Me, myself, have been part of that, right? I've had FUD happen to me almost every single week, but the people in the know the actual truth, right? So one of our plans this month in 2 weeks, we'll be going to the offices, doing a video and everything to show people this is real.
Okay. That ability to understand and deep dive is something that needs to happen more and more in this industry, number 1. Number 2, if it does, if we get more credible voices in this space where we are all doing more due diligence and more deep diving, where do you envision this industry will be in 5 years? If this industry takes the responsibility of being transparent, being self-regulating, being responsible, and creating a fair platform, where do you see this industry going in 5 years?
The moon. I think this is the biggest innovation in technology since the internet itself. So similar to the dot-com age, I feel this really is the next dot-com age, right? So now we're just kind of really trying to soldier through and just kind of get everything together. But I think in 5 years, everything will be more cleaned up, more refined, and more people are adopting blockchain and crypto.
All right, Ian, super cool. I want to see where we are a year from now.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
Okay,
it's been
absolutely.
a pleasure.
Breaking news from Forecast News. We have an exclusive announcement with Ian Balina, who is exclusively announcing on Forecast News that you are joining forces with KuCoin as global ambassador. That's pretty big news for the industry.